Primordial Cause of Creation, in early editions titled Kshire Sarpiri Varpitam. The people of ancient times used to employ all their energy for the gratification of their gross propensities, vrittis, but eventually they noticed that even through the persistent application of their individual and collective forces, their propensities were not fully fulfilled. It appeared that some unseen and greater force was playing with them every moment, thwarting all their efforts. Gradually they understood that no matter how strongly they tried to impose their individual and collective might, their capacity was limited, for their field of action was confined to the relative factors of time, space, and person. What is that entity to whose inviolable decree they were ultimately compelled to submit? What are his characteristics? Who is he? No matter how developed the intellect, or how pervasive its force, it is so difficult for us to fathom the immeasurable vastness of that entity. People unable to attain their objects of desire bang their heads against the wall in utter frustration. Yet sometimes desired objects come to them, whether they had wished for them or not. They accept this as their fate, but fate does not depend on anyone's whim, for if whim were everything, the seed of the microcosmic longings would have withered, but it has not. Thus people began to think that fate is nothing more than the reactions to their past actions. But as they cannot see their or understand their original actions, they call it their adrishta, destiny. But in spite of human beings having attained a certain amount of freedom from the Supreme Controller, who allots their reactions to actions, even then they are at his total mercy. They are like footballs, which can be kicked in any direction, according to the desire of the players. This dependence on Paramapurusha is essential for movement and inspiration. While seeking the original source, Preti, of this inspiration, the thoughtful people of the distant past cultivated intuitional science, Brahma Tattva. The subtlety of thought of those contemplative, progressive people led them gradually from the world of matter to the world of ideas, and from the world of ideas to the world of consciousness. In the world of wisdom, they were the first rishis, the first torch-bearers of the illuminating flame of knowledge. They eventually succeeded in using their intellectual faculties to penetrate the sphere of consciousness. As a result of the constant sharing of their intellect, human beings learn Brahma Vijnana, or intuitional science. Lay people went to those rishis to illuminate the dark recesses of their minds with their bright light, and those wise people, in this process of answering each complex or simple question, eventually became masters of the intuitional sciences. The question of the lay people were, Kim karanam brahma kutasma yata jivama kenakva sha sampratishta adishitaha kena suketareshu vartamahe brahma vido vyavashtam. What is Brahma? What is the fundamental cause of our existence? What sustains our life? On what foundation does our existence stand? What is our base? Why is life a passing experience of pleasure and pain? O knower of Brahma, provide us with proper answers to these questions. Kalashvabhavo niyatir yadrisha Bhutani yoni purusha iti shintya samyoga esham natvatma bhavad atma pyanishaha sukha dukkha heto. There is an unending number of questions in the human mind. Do the solutions of the above problems lie in the time factor, Is time the final answer? Is it the absolute truth? It appears that the first cause of creation is hidden in the womb of time, so time must be the original cause, the absolute factor. Is this not so? Whatever took place, whatever is taking place, and whatever will take place, is within the periphery of time, is it not? It must be the temporal factor, Kala Shakti, which has been given birth to the universe as the universal mother, Vishva Janani, which has been preserving everything in its rhythmic and cyclic movement, and which, with its frantic dance, raucous laughter, and gnashing teeth, has been destroying the world with its formidable power. The inscrutable play of light is nothing but a momentary flash upon its features. Belching darkness, out of darkness, time alone is the sole, well-established entity. O Rishi, tell us, is not time alone the absolute entity? The knower of Brahma replies, no, time is not the absolute entity. Time is only a relative factor, which is entirely dependent on the mutual relationship of place and person. Time is but the mind's measurement of the motivity of action. When there is no motivity of action, or when there is motivity of action, but no mind to measure it, there is no time. To say that time is beginningless and endless is also incorrect. How can I accept that the universe was created in the womb of beginningless time, and that in the womb of endless time the universe will disappear? The mind, Patramana, mind of a person in which measurement exists, did not exist before the creation, and thus there existed no imagination to measure time. The place and person upon which time depend are also relative factors. This evolutionary panorama revolves around the relative interdependence of the three relative factors: time, place, and person. Thus, time, which is entirely dependent on place and person, can never be the absolute factor. During sleep or in a senseless state, the relation between place and person is not properly manifest, and so time becomes non-existent for that period. In order to realize that a period of time has lapsed between going to sleep and waking up, one has to study the environmental changes. We have formulated the solar year, solar month, and solar day on the basis of the Earth's rotation around the Sun. Similarly, the lunar year, lunar month, and lunar day have been determined on the basis of the rotation of the Moon around the Earth. If the Earth has not moved around the Sun, or the Moon around the Earth, or if the stars and planets had not followed their respective movements, time would never have existed. Unlike Tom, Dick, and Harry, or Shita, Aham Tattva and Mahatattva, or Purusha, time is not a well-manifest factor. It is neither non-matter, nor is it totally independent of matter. Even if we were to call time non-matter, we would still have to admit that time is dependent on objects. The symbolization of time is impossible, because it is non-material. Moreover, it is impossible to form an idea of time without thinking of objects, as its existence is dependent on objects. If we say 100,000 years ago, at once we indirectly think within ourselves that this incident occurred after an object like the Earth rotated around an object like the Sun 100,000 times. So no matter how we measure it, how we measure time, backward or forward, we have to bring it within the count of kalpas, mythologically, one day and night of Brahma, a period of 432 solar years of the mortals, or yugas, eras, years or months. And these kalpas, yugas and months, are solely and wholly dependent on objects. In the absence of objects, these concepts of time would have been non-existent. I have already told you that the objects upon which time depend are also not the ultimate factor. Direction such as east, west, north, south is not the absolute factor, either. From afar the moon looks like a small dish, but nearer it looks like a continent. Thus space too is not a stable entity. By the shortest route, Bhagalpur is to the east of Mongir, but by the long route, which takes one around the whole world, it is to the west of Mongir. So direction is also not an absolute factor. The person factor is also far from the absolute. People's nature and characteristics are so different. Time is not a fixed concept, because it is dependent on changing entities. The news of the world of yesterday is past to us, present to some other planet, and future to yet another planet. Past, present, and future, upon which the expansion of time depends, are imagined according to the differences in place and person. So in reply to this natural question of the human mind, the rishis or seers of those days said, time can never be accepted as the primordial cause of creation. Is nature, Svabhava, the fundamental cause of the universe? The Rishi says, no, nature does not have original authorship. Nature is only the flow of the three immanent principles, Sattva, Raja and Tama, of Prakriti. It is an evolutionary flow, and thus on seeing just one stage of it, we can infer its previous and subsequent stages. Being aware of the trends of nature, we can study the tendencies and behavior of living beings, plants and inanimate objects, what their individual characteristics are, how they evolved, what their potentialities are, how they will develop, etc. This study is what is called science. When this study is concerned with the material world, we call it physical science. Nature is not the original authority or doer entity, but is the dynamic waves of the centrifugal and centripetal movements, sanchara and pratisanchara, of Prakriti. It cannot best be the determinant of the intrinsic characteristics of objects, but not their primary cause. Nature is a certain law, a certain procedure, but not the creating force. Nature cannot be accepted as the supreme authority. So what is the primary cause of the world? Is it destiny, niyati? The Rishi says, no, not even that. Niyati is derived from the root ni, yam, plus ktin, and means that which controls the subsequent actions. As one sows, so shall one reap. The amount of reactions to be undergone by the unit entity is equal to the total actions previously performed. Destiny is the totality of unrequited reactions of actions performed. Its reactive momenta are called samskaras. In this observable world, the samskara-ridden unit entities cannot go beyond destiny's influence. Destiny keeps them so tightly in its grip that they think it is the controller of their fate, Bhagya Niyanta, as though it had already determined their path of progress. But destiny cannot be the absolute factor, for if you do not exist, if you do not act, destiny cannot exist either. Being dependent upon your doership for its existence, it cannot be the supreme controller. Now another question arises. Is this cosmic creation accidental? The Rishi says no, there is no such thing as an accident. Behind every event that takes place in the universe, there is the law of causation, karana bhavat, karya bhava. There is no effect without a cause. Truly speaking, whatever we take to be an accident is nothing but an incident, whose preceding cause we are unable to see or understand properly. So the word accident is meaningless, and to call this universe an accidental creation is simply to camouflage one's ignorance. Are the five fundamental factors the primary cause of this universe? Has consciousness evolved out of matter? No, says the Rishi. Matter or the five fundamental factors cannot be the absolute authority. None of them has the power or capacity of self-determination. Each one of them has to proceed through clashes and conflicts at the behest of some unseen power. Even in the very crude sphere, these five elements have to proceed according to individual or collective human intellect. A little analysis will reveal that the five elements have no authority or doership in any of their conditions. They are always preoccupied with activities. An entity with functional obligations can on no account be the primary cause or absolute controller. Is Jivatman, then, the supreme factor? No, says the Rishi, not even that. Jivatma is only a cognitive force, Jinatri Shakti, not an authority. Cognizance is possible of a cognitive force, not of the creation. Since the attributes of a knowing entity, Janatri Satta, are absent, it can never be the creator. The Atman is the knowing entity, not the creating force, and so Jivatman also is not the absolute authority. Is creation accomplished through the union and mutual cooperation of two or more of the factors like time, nature, destiny, accident, elements, or Jivatman? The Rishi says, no. With the exception of Svabhava, or the operative Prakriti, none has any direct contact with Purusha. Cosmic creation is not possible as the result of the union of nature, Svabhava or Prakriti, or actional force, Karma Shakti, with the Purusha, or Jivatman, or cognitive force. The expression of the Karma Shakti, actional flow, in the Jnana Shakti, cognitive force of the Jivatman, no doubt gives rise to the I-feeling, or the manifestation of the mind, but that petty ego, due to the smallness of its sphere of activity, does not have the capacity of creating the universe, nor is it able to contact the creative cosmic force. The microcosmic subjectivity, Jivatma Bhava, cannot accept the world of objectivity with complete indifference. Thus the contact of matter with Jivatman cannot be accepted as the absolute factor. The conjunction of matter with Jivatman merely transforms objects into vehicles of enjoyment, and the result of this enjoyment is invariably addiction. Jivatman is anisha, one having no controlling power, and so it has to take shelter in others. This is why the microcosmic subjectivity, Jivatma Bhava, becomes partially or fully attached to different entities. This attachment is the greatest characteristic of an entity having no controlling power. Jivatman is not Isha, but Anisha, not the controller, but the controlled entity, and thus cannot be the cause of creation. It is because of this Anisha that unit beings have to undergo the mental distortions of pleasure and pain, and become assailed by virtue and vice as a result of environmental influences and struggles. That which is constantly being buffeted and battered every moment cannot discover the absolute factor. The Rishi says that you cannot discover the primordial factor in this way. In order to find it, you will have to reach the cause of all causes, Adi Karana, the supreme cause, which itself has no cause. This causeless factor is the final answer to all queries, the culminating point of all contemplation and deliberation. Theoretically, this supreme factor is certainly difficult for the common people to know, for they have to proceed backwards along the path of causation. But if sadhakas evolve their intellect from crudity to subtlety, it will be possible for them to reach the non-causal factor. The Rishi says, Te dhyana yoga nugata apashyan devatma shaktim svaguna nigudam yaha karanani niklani tani kalatma yukta nyadi tishtatyekaha. The rishis have realized the supreme truth through the practical cult of dhyana, meditation, by withdrawing the vrittis to their causes and by moving from crudity to subtlety. They have realized the supreme Purusha and his eminent power, Parama Prakriti. They have realized that the quintessence of all essence, the knowledge of all knowledge, is that supreme Purusha himself. After attaining him, the necessity to look for any cause disappears. Moving towards subtlety, only the strength of their manifest power, they have realized the supreme force, Paramashakti, the supreme Purusha that they have realized in their meditation, and the Parama Prakriti that they have attained in their contemplative vision are indeed identical and inseparable. Paramapurusha, through the medium of his Prakriti, or operative principle, is the primordial cause of the creation of the world. Truly speaking, had it not been for his operative principle, he would not have been able to evolve the universe. Purusha permits himself to be influenced by this attributional force, Prakriti, and appears in the role of Saguna, qualified Purusha. But when this attributional force does not find expression, Purusha cannot be qualified. The Supreme Consciousness Purusha, together with the Supreme Operative Principle Prakriti, is the absolute authority of the manifested universe. Time, nature, destiny, and accident are born in him and sheltered in him. He alone is the Supreme Creator, the supreme shelter of all. The apparent cause of the factors we call relative truths, time, space, and person, is the Jivatmanas, the unit mind, and the cause of these Jivatmanas is the qualified consciousness, Saguna Brahma, in conjunction with Parama Prakriti. Sarva jive sarva samshte brihante tasmin hamsho brahmyate brahma shakre prithagatmanam preritaranshamatva yustastateshtenamritattvameti. No matter what the entity may be, and no matter what the mainstay of their lives, crude or subtle, all are created within him, and within him all are destroyed. The flow of relativities goes on unabated through the media of creation, preservation, and destruction. Where there is no such flow of relativities, the question of life and death does not arise. Unit beings in quest of the support for the fulfillment of their wishes and desires run after one or the other of these relative truths. They move practically within the vast cosmic cycle without recognizing its fundamental nucleus. In their limitless pursuit, they lose all their mental resources immediately after attaining them. They are unable to recognize Purushottama, the nucleus of eternal peace. Drunk with desire for material objects, they do not even attempt to recognize him. In the hypnotic spell of their pursuit, they remain smugly oblivious of the fact that on a certain auspicious dawn in the past they emerge from the original source with which they still have an unknown yet intimate relationship today, that they still have the same Atman as the Supreme Creator. Nevertheless, his limitless mercy continues to be showered upon them, incessantly and indiscriminately. Only when they run to him, attracted by his divine grace, enchanted by his sweetness and benevolence, will they attain real deathlessness. Whatever the unit can or cannot imagine, he holds in his macrocosmic mind. Bhuma Manas. Udgita mitat paramam tu brahma tasmim strayam supratish taksharansha atrantaram brahma vido viditva lina brahmani tatpara yoni mukta. The supreme truth that the rishis realized through their contemplation could not be confined within a specific name. He is great, enormously great. His vastness is immeasurable, having no length or breadth. He is Brahma. If one has to define him, one cannot use other word except this. That is why the rishis called him Brahma. Jiva microcosm, Jagat world, and Ishvara Lord are established within him. As microcosm, Jiva Bhava, he is being controlled. As Ishvara, he is controlling, and as Jagat, he is providing the link between Jiva and Ishvara. It is not the Jiva, Jagat, and Ishvara alone comprising his being. Transcendentally, he abides as the Akshara intransmutable, and as the Nirakshara, perfect placidity, perfect objectlessness. The Brahmavid, knowing this Brahma, loses identity in Brahma, and merging in him becomes Brahma himself, and attains eternal emancipation from the shackles of life and death. Samyukta mitat ksharamaksharancha vyakta vyaktam bharate vishvavamishaha anisha shatma vadyate bhuktri bhavat janatva deva muchate. Sarva Pashaye. This Brahma comprises the joint being of Kshara and Akshara, perishable and imperishable, perishability and imperishability. The manifest being, metamorphosed through his psychic action, is called his Kshara Bhava, and the non-manifest being that remains as the witness of all psychic metamorphosis is his Akshara Bhava. This word, Akshara, means that which does not undergo any metamorphosis. In these two bearings of Kshara and Akshara, consistency and coordination between both the subjective and objective realities is being maintained. Brahmic or cosmic manifestation is the accomplishment of that coordination by the Supreme Being. But where there is no manifestation, there is no question of subjectivity or objectivity. There he is Nirakshara. Nirakshara is identical with Avyakta, unmanifest. But where Kshara and Akshara exist in combination, there the Akshara, in his witnessship of Kshara, can remain in both bearings. One bearing Kshara in the unit mind, Khanda Manas, and the other Akshara is in the cosmic mind, Purna Manas, the central point of the nucleus of the cosmic mind. The Akshara, which is vaster than the endless sea, is known as Purushottama. Purushottama is the Supreme Master, Parama Bharta. Bharta means feeder of this Ksharatmaka or changeable and unchangeable world entity. All the manifest objects, Vyakta, look unto him for their expressions. The expressible potentials of the unexpressed entities, Avyakta, also get opportunities for the manifestation through his generosity. It is with the cooperation of the Vyakta and Avyakta, and Kshara and Akshara, that this Brahma Chakra or cosmic cycle is comprised of manifest and unmanifest, perishable and unperishable entities. And since Brahma Chakra is dependent on the Supreme Purusha, we may say he is the sustaining force of the unchangeable character of Akshara, the supreme witness of individual minds. When his supreme stand is modified, Akshara undergoes a slight qualification, but Purushottama, the witness of the individual minds, remains unaffected. When the pleasure-seeking unit mind blindly runs off the unit objects, Purusha also gets smitten by the same mental attributes. He appears to be as if in bondage, but when the unit mind shuns its attraction for mundane objects and accepts the Supreme Purusha as its only problem, it gets an opportunity to become one with that cosmic mind. Giving up its finitude, with the attainment of the witnessship of the integral mind, it becomes one with the Purushottama. In the absence of bondage, of enjoyership, Bhakta Bhava, the unit mind attains emancipation from all kinds of fetters. Jnana Jnanao Dvavaya Vishanishavaya Yeka Bhuktri Bhogyarthayukta Ananta Shatma Vishvarupo Yakta Hiyakarta Trayam Yada Vindate Brahma Metat. Although both Jiva Bhava and Shiva Bhava, microcosm and macrocosm, are but the entitative variations of the unborn consciousness, the microcosm has no knowledge of its characteristic self. Unlike the macrocosm, which is all-knowing, the microcosm is the shadow entity of the macrocosm, and so it is assailed by the bondage of limitation. It is deprived of the bliss of freedom, for power abides in the original, not in the shadow, and is thus compelled to emulate what the original entity does. So one is Isha, controller, and the other Anisha, controlled. Both of them imbibe a dynamic self-created force which is Prakriti. Prakriti creates the bearing as Bhoktiritva, enjoyship, and Bhogyatva, enjoyability, in the microcosms. It is through her grace that the microcosm preserves its finite existence, but the macrocosm, the blissful entity, is not subject to this Prakriti. The ways of her binding principles, Prakrita Bhava, Saguna Brahma, is the composite of these three, microcosm, macrocosm, and binding principle, and Purushottama, who abides as the witness of all three, is not himself the doer, although this heteromorphic universe is evolved out of him. Ksharam pradhanam amrita ksharam hara ksharatmana vishate deva ekaha tasya vidyanan yojanat tattva bhavad bhuja shante vishvamayan nivritti. The kshara akshara distinctions are present in the body of this vast Brahma. Kshara is evolved by the influence of Prakriti. Akshara or Hara is not transmuted by Prakriti, but is conjoined with Prakriti, the knowing entity. Apart from these two, Kshara and Hara, there is another conscious entity, Purushottama, who transmutes himself within his own imagination, who continues his imaginative flow through Kshara and Akshara, which is beyond the domain of Kshara. In his imaginative flow, Kshara changes its names and forms at every moment, but the Akshara Bhava, although constantly assailed by Kshara, undergoes no change and remains as the witness of Kshara. Purushottama, however, remains unassailed by the combined flow of Kshara and Akshara. When sadhakas in quest of him channelize all their propensities towards Purushottama, they become unified with him and attain his greatness. At that time, all the bondages of finitude are ripped apart, and the shapes and illusions of the world lose their power of allurement. They then attain liberation. Janatva devam sarva pasha panni kshinae kleshair janma mrityu prahani tasya vidyanatrityam deha vide vishvaeshvaryam kevala apta kamaha. What happens when sadhakas succeed in the quest to know Purushottama and gets united with him? All bondages are snapped. When one loses all attachment for pettiness, the bondages which create pettiness also perish. With the dissolution of the unit mind, that is, with the attainment of mental expansion, suffering also gradually wanes. Even the bondages of life and death is broken, for life and death belong to the finite, and so does the fear of them. The great Brahma is beyond the scope of life and death, and so the one who becomes completely identified with him also remains unassailed by their ceaseless play. The occult power that sadhakas first attain on the spiritual path after understanding him a little is not the ultimate goal. Still higher than that, surmounting even the barrier, when sadhakas become free of attachment to occult powers, when even the residue of their existential feeling disappears in the state of excellence, when one becomes him, after knowing him, this state is called Savikalpa Samadhi, or the determinate trance of absorption. In such a state, the ego becomes infinitely pervasive. But the next stage, which is the absolute bearing, where the existential I feeling is compelled to lose itself in his extraordinary radiance, is called Nirvikalpa Samadhi, state of total absorption, or Kevalya, oneness. The word kevala means only, so the state in which there remains only one sentiment, only one bearing, when the pure conscious entity is beyond knowledge, knowable, and knower, is called kevalya, or absolute entity with a divine essence. Only when sadhakas are absorbed in the state of total absorption in him, Brahma Bhava, and lose themselves in ecstasy, do they attain kevalya sthiti, ensconcement in oneness. So the poet said, Rupa nirakya nayana bulila shinnite narinuke. Seeing his endless beautiful form, I was charmed, but my mind could not fathom his depths. There being neither duality nor any existential feeling. The three aspects of seer, seeable, and seen also merge in the characteristic cognition. Ita jnanayam nityamivatma samstam nataha param medittavyam hi kinchit bhukta bhogyam preritaranchamatva sarvam pruktam trividam brahma metat. The word brahmetat used in the slok is brahma etat maybe. Paramapurusha is the only knowable entity for unit beings. If anything is to be known at all, it is He, and He alone. If any body is to be ideated upon, it is He, and He alone. He is the only immutable entity. There is nothing at all to know beyond Him. Knowing Him is knowing everything. The seed of whatever is manifest or unmanifest in the universe is embedded in Him. He is the panacea of all ailments. Philosophically, Brahma has three bearings: Bhaktribhava, microcosmic bearing; Bhogyabhava, object of enjoyment; and Prerajitribhava, controlling authority. Wise people say that Brahma is the composite of these three bearings, claiming its own authority. The microcosm wants to enjoy the quinquelemental objects, which it forgets are the macropsychic creation, with the help of its unit mind. The controlling authority is the coordinating link between the subjectivity and the objectivity. Its inspiration, the microcosmic, to dissipate its finitude. With the strength derived from sadhana, the microcosms accelerate towards the supreme controller. When they attain oneness with him, their quinquelemental objects of enjoyment become non-existent. In the absence of the enjoyer, microcosm and the enjoyable, the controlling authority merges in the non-attribution of Brahma. Human beings should always remember that their entire existential faculty depends on the grace of the supreme controlling authority. It is due to His grace alone that they get the opportunity to continue spiritual practice. They could never know Paramartha without His divine grace. Tvameva matasha pitta tvameva, tvameva bandhusha saka tvameva, tvameva vidyasha dravinam tvameva, tvameva sarva mama deva deva. Know that Purushottama, that supreme controlling authority. Try to attain Him alone. He has not delegated His absolute authority, His formidable power, to anyone else, for He has to carry the burden of the collectivity of the universe. He has to bear the seal of qualification, even though He is non-attributional. Know that Supreme Father. Exhort His kindness through your strength and devotion. What is the secret of receiving His kindness? Do what pleases Him. Abide by His wishes rigidly. Float your life on the actional waves of His choice, and He is bound to smile on you. He will be compelled to. Snatch away His kindness on the strength of your devotion. He will put a garland of victory around your neck with His own hands if you go on performing your deeds like a hero. Svadhyayam aranim kritva pranavanshotararanim dhyana nirmatana vyashad devam pashyeni nigurhavat. How should you carry on with your work? You must make proper use of the human body, mind and soul that you possess through His grace. Make cent% use of the treasures, however meager you think they may be, that He has bestowed upon you. Do not avoid work out of fear. Do not misuse your body, mind and soul, or allow your capabilities to lose their power. Use your own body as one wood flint, Arani, and the cosmic sound, Omkara, as the other wood flint, Uttarani. The cosmic sound is emanating every moment from the actional waves of the cosmic mind, and thus finds expression in every action. Just as friction between the two flints to produce fire, similarly the friction between your body as one flint and your intuitional practice as the other flint, enables you to visualize that divine effulgence and become unified with Paramatman in the form of Omkara. In other words, this divine effulgence was lying latent in both the body and Omkara, and through the constant friction of the intuitional practice bursts into blazing brilliance. He lies hidden in you, and in every minute particle of this universe, in both his individual and pervasive associations. Cherishing a strong desire to know and understand him, think of him, ideate on him, meditate on him, you will certainly attain him. Tileshu tailam dadiniva sarpirapaha shrota shvaranishu shagni eva matmatmani griyate shau satyena inam tapassa yonu pashyati. Do you know how he remains hidden in everything? Just as oil remains hidden in a sesame seed, if you look at the sesame seed, you will see only the seed and not the oil. But crush it, and the oil will emerge. He abides in everything, but you cannot see him, for you look with a superficial vision. Do sadhana, meditate, powder down your mind, and he will appear. Ghee, clarified butter, exists in milk, but can you see it? Churn the milk, and the ghee will appear before your eyes. Look at the dry mountainous river, and you will see nothing but sand. Is there no water in it? Take a little trouble, remove the sand, you will find its bosom full of sweet water. Look at a piece of wood. You can't see any fire in it, can you? But the fire potential is latent within it. Take a little trouble, rub two pieces of wood together, and the fire will ignite. Similarly, you are unable to see that great Purusha within you. You cannot understand that he permeates every secret core of your molecules and atoms. Churn yourself with truth and meditation, and he will blossom forth within you. Sarvavyapina matmanam kshire sarpiri varpitam atma vidyata pomulam tad brahmo panishat param. He is all-pervading. Do not think that he abides in a number of particular entities only. He exists equally in everything. Ghee exists in milk, but is it restricted to any particular region of the milk? No, the ghee permeates throughout all of the milk. The so-called high and low, rich and poor, Brahmin and untouchable, man and woman, old and young, Russian and American, are all his manifestations. He abides equally in all of them. Do not look down upon any of them. None is an object of your contempt or hatred. If you despise even the smallest or meanest entity, remember that you are despising Parama Brahma himself. Can human beings claim and credit for the attainment of the supreme entity? Sadhakas can be likened to businessmen who conduct their affairs with others' capital. They have acquired the epithet sadhaka, but actually the power of sadhana has been bestowed upon them by Parama Purusha. Probe deeply into all spiritual knowledge. You will see only him. It is he who provides you with the intellect and strength to do sadhana. Surrender yourself to his will. Shake off your load of self-conceit. Lighten the burden of your life, and float yourself on the waves of his will. It is he who is teaching you the sadhana in the guise of a guru, preceptor. It is he who is strengthening your knowledge and faith in the guise of a philosopher. You are plundering his mercy in everything day and night. Go on working as a machine, leaving the doership to him. How little can your poor intellect comprehend or analyze his unfathomable sport, lila. So instead of trying to comprehend or analyze, keep the bearing of that inscrutable juggler aglow before your eyes. Sappaya katare banda roja heya gado kata kiramat janare banda kata kiramat jana tumi mai darijai yal filaiya tangai baishatanu. As a snake you bite someone, and as a snake charmer You cure the snake bite. How many tricks do you know? You throw your fishing net in the river and draw it in sitting on the bank. So I repeat, do not try to analyze that supreme entity with the pride of your petty intellect. Do the sadhana of attaining him with the ardent devotion of your heart, and all your discrepancies and limitations will end. Remember, where you is, he is not, and where he is, small you is not. He is your final destination. Don't let your desires and propensities go astray except towards him. Let all your longings float on the waves of his grace. Vanai vidyapati shesha shamana bhaye tuya vinu gati nahi ara adi anadika nata kahayasi avatarana bharatohara. All the Vedas describes Parama Purusha. Make him the goal of your life. He is your supreme terminus. He is the supreme authority. Bhadra Purnima 1956 DMC Bhagalpur.